Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to WideAwakeHorror today. Just want to say, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join the family. And as always, if you like these stories, you know what to do. Smash that like button and let us know in the comments what you think. And as always, enjoy the stories.
I knew it was a bad idea the second she said it, but it did not sound crazy at first. That is how it starts. Nothing dramatic, just small requests that feel almost cute, like she's trying to be different from every other date you have been on. We were sitting in this quiet little wine bar tucked between a laundromat and a closed bookstore. You would miss it if you blinked. Low lighting, soft music, only 6 tables, the kind of place people go when they want to feel mysterious. It was our third date. We met through a hiking group online. First time was coffee after a group trail. Second time was a walk through a weekend market. She seemed normal, calm, a little intense with eye contact, but some people are just like that. That night, she dressed differently. Darker clothes, hair pulled back tight. She picked the place and said she liked how disconnected it felt from the city. When the waiter left us with 2 glasses of wine that cost $24 each, she leaned forward and said she had a small request. She said she wanted us to be fully present. No distractions, no screens lighting up. I laughed and said that sounded fair. She asked me to put my phone on the table, face down, and promised she would do the same. It felt harmless, almost refreshing. I placed mine down. She placed hers next to it. We started talking, deeper stuff this time. Childhood fears, past relationships. She asked me what my worst habit was. I said probably scrolling too much at night. She smiled at that like it meant more than it did. About 20 minutes in, I got up to use the restroom. My phone was still on the table. I hesitated for half a second, but figured it was fine. She was still sitting there. The place was small, not exactly a high crime area. When I came back, something felt slightly off. Nothing obvious, just a tiny shift in the air. We kept talking. I reached for my phone at one point out of habit, just to check the time. It was not there. I looked around the table, under the napkin, near the edge. Nothing. I thought maybe I left it in the restroom, which made no sense because I clearly remembered placing it down. I asked if she had moved it. She looked confused for a split second, then said maybe it slid off the table. We both checked under the table. Nothing. My chest started tightening. She suggested maybe I dropped it on the way back from the restroom. She even offered to help me look. We walked to the hallway together. No phone on the floor. I could feel my pulse rising. That phone had everything. Banking apps, work emails, photos, my entire life. We went back to the table. That is when I noticed her purse looked slightly fuller than before. It was one of those medium-sized leather bags with a zipper across the top. When I first sat down, it looked flat against the chair. Now it bulged slightly at the side. My brain did not want to go there. It felt accusatory, paranoid, but I could not ignore it. I asked if she was sure she had not moved it by accident. She gave me a look like I had just insulted her. She said, why would she do that? I said I did not know. The waiter passed by and asked if everything was okay. I forced a smile and said yes. I asked if I could call my phone from hers. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she unzipped her purse to grab her phone, and I heard it, the faint vibration sound, coming from inside her bag. My stomach dropped so hard it almost hurt. She froze too. The vibration continued for a few seconds before stopping. The silence between us was heavy. I stared at her purse. She slowly reached inside and pulled out my phone. She held it like she had just found it there by accident. She said it must have fallen in when she adjusted her bag. That did not make sense. My phone had been on the opposite side of the table. I asked why she did not notice it before. She said she did not feel it. I took the phone from her hand. The screen was on. My Messages app was open. Not just open. Scrolled. I could see threads that were not at the top before. She had been going through it. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the music in the background anymore. I asked if she had unlocked it. She said it must have been unlocked already. It was not. I always lock it. I checked my settings quickly. Face ID was still on, which meant she had probably held it up to my face while I was in the restroom earlier, or tried guessing the passcode. I felt exposed in a way that is hard to explain, like someone had walked into my apartment and opened every drawer. She started talking fast, saying she was just curious, that she liked to understand people fully, that transparency was important to her. Important. She said if we were going to build something real, she needed to know there were no secrets. We had been on 3 dates. I asked what she had read. She shrugged like it was nothing. She mentioned a friend's name from a conversation in my messages, one I had not brought up to her before. That confirmed it. She had not just glanced at the screen. She had gone digging. I told her that was not okay. Her expression changed. Not angry, just blank. She said she was testing something. Testing. She said she wanted to see how easily she could access my world, how much control she could have if she needed it. Control. My hands were shaking now, but I tried to stay steady. I told her that was not normal behavior. She leaned back in her chair and said most people hide who they really are behind passwords. She said she preferred honesty. I looked around the room. The other tables were empty now. The bartender was wiping down glasses at the far end. I realized how isolated it felt despite being public. I stood up and said I needed to leave. She did not try to stop me. She just watched. As I walked toward the door, my phone buzzed again. I looked down. A new contact had been added. Under favorites. Her name. I'd never added it there. I turned around. She was still sitting at the table, calmly sipping her wine. She had done that while my phone was in her bag. I left without saying anything else. In the parking lot, I went through my settings. A new device had been trusted under Bluetooth connections. I did not recognize it. She had paired something to my phone in those few minutes. I deleted it immediately. When I got home, I reset my passwords. All of them. The next morning, I noticed a login attempt on one of my accounts from a device in my area. I blocked her everywhere. 2 days later, a small envelope showed up in my mailbox. Inside was a printed screenshot of my home screen, taken from a slight angle. Not a digital screenshot. A photo of my phone on that table. Before I ever noticed it was gone. I did not think a single sentence could flip a whole night upside down, but it can. 1 second, you are laughing over overpriced fries in a booth that smells like ketchup and old wood. And the next second, you are staring at someone across from you, wondering how long they have been thinking something you never saw coming. We were at this roadside diner off the highway, the kind that stays open 24 hours because truck drivers need somewhere to sit at 3 in the morning. It was not romantic. It was not fancy. That is why I liked it. Bright lights, too much coffee, people coming in and out. Safe. It was our second date. We met through mutual friends at a birthday party. He seemed quiet but steady. Worked as a mechanic at a shop about 15 minutes from where I live. He had that calm vibe that makes you feel like nothing rattles him. The first date was simple. Burgers, short walk, nothing weird. He did not try to push anything. He did not overshare. If anything, he seemed almost shy. So when he asked me to meet again, I said yes without overthinking it. That night at the diner, everything started normal. We talked about work. I told him about the chaos at the dental office where I worked the front desk. He told me about customers who ignored warning lights on their dashboards until their engines gave up. He asked about my family. I told him my parents lived 2 towns over. My younger sister was away at college. Nothing dramatic. At some point, the conversation slowed down. Not awkward, just quiet. The waitress refilled our drinks and left. The booths around us were mostly empty now. It was getting later. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. And then he asked if anyone would notice if I did not come home tonight. He said it casually, like he was asking about the weather. For a second, I thought I misheard him. I laughed lightly, thinking maybe he meant would my roommate worry. Except I do not have a roommate. I live alone in a small 1-bedroom near the train tracks. He kept looking at me, waiting. I asked what he meant. He tilted his head and repeated it in a softer tone, if anyone would actually notice. My chest felt tight. The fluorescent lights above us suddenly felt too bright. I told him my parents would notice eventually, that I talked to my mom most days, that I have coworkers who would call if I did not show up. He nodded slowly, like he was calculating something. Then he asked how long it would take. How long before someone came looking? I stared at him, trying to figure out if this was some kind of twisted joke. His face did not change. No smile, no smirk, just steady eye contact. I told him I had plans the next morning, that my manager would call me by 9 if I did not show up. He leaned back slightly, processing that. The air between us shifted. Everything felt wrong now, like I had stepped into a different version of the night. I started noticing small things I had ignored before. When we first arrived, he had insisted on driving separately, even though he passed near my apartment on the way. He had parked his truck in a spot that blocked part of the exit lane. At the time, thought it was just lazy parking. Now it felt intentional. I glanced toward the front door of the diner. Still open, still people inside. I told myself to stay calm. He asked what my morning routine looked like, what time I usually left for work, whether I took the same route every day. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to answer vaguely. Said it depended. Said I sometimes worked different shifts. He looked at my hands resting on the table. I noticed then that he had been watching me closely all night, not just listening, studying. I decided to flip the energy. I asked him the same question, if anyone would notice if he did not come home. He shrugged and said not really, that he kept to himself, that most people assumed he was busy. The way he said it was almost proud. I checked my phone casually under the table and sent a quick text to my sister. Just something random so there would be a timestamp, so someone knew I was out. He noticed. He asked who I was texting. I said my sister. He nodded again, slower this time. I realized then that he was not asking out of curiosity. He was gathering information. The waitress came by again and asked if we needed anything else. I almost said yes, call the police. But instead I asked for the check. He did not argue, which somehow made it worse. We walked out together into the parking lot. The air was cooler now, the highway humming in the distance. Only a few cars remained. His truck was parked 2 spaces away from my car. I fumbled with my keys on purpose, pretending to search through my bag so he would walk ahead. He did not. He stood there watching. He asked if I felt safe living alone. I said yes. He stepped closer. I could smell motor oil faintly on his jacket. He said sometimes people think they are more visible than they are, that days can pass before anyone realizes someone is gone. My pulse was so loud in my ears I could barely think. I told him I had a security system in my apartment, which was not true. I told him my neighbor was a cop, also not true. He paused for the first time that night. A flicker of something crossed his face. Annoyance, maybe. I unlocked my car quickly and got inside, locked the doors immediately. He stood there for a few seconds longer than normal, just staring through the windshield. Then he turned and got into his truck. I did not start my engine right away. I waited until he did. I watched which direction he pulled out. He did not head toward the highway. He turned into the darker side lot of the diner like he was parking again. I did not wait to see more. I drove straight home, checking my mirrors the entire way. Halfway there, I noticed headlights behind me that stayed the same distance no matter how fast or slow I went. My heart dropped. I made a sudden turn into a busy gas station. The headlights passed by without slowing. Maybe it was not him. Maybe it was. I stayed at that gas station for 20 minutes, pretending to look at snacks. When I finally got home, I locked every door and window. I barely slept. The next morning, I checked my phone. There was one message from him sent at 2:14 a.m. He said he hoped I got home safe. Nothing else. I blocked his number, deleted him from everything. A week later, my manager mentioned a guy had stopped by the office asking if I still worked there, said he claimed to be an old friend. She told him she could not share employee information. I did not ask what he looked like. I already knew. I changed my route to work after that, started texting my sister whenever I left the house. Not because I am paranoid, but because I read that sentence in my head too many times. If anyone would notice if I did not come home tonight, I make sure they would. I wish I could say I saw it coming, but the worst part is that the night started out normal. Not perfect, not magical, just normal. And now, whenever something feels normal on a date, I get nervous. We were sitting in this small rooftop bar above a parking garage downtown. It was one of those spots that tried really hard to look casual. String lights hanging everywhere, fake plants zip-tied to the railing, metal stools that were uncomfortable after 10 minutes. You could see half the city from up there, traffic moving like glowing lines below us. I remember thinking it was a good sign that she picked somewhere public, somewhere open. We had been talking for about a month, matched on an app, the usual. She seemed funny, sarcastic in a dry way that actually made me laugh instead of forcing it. She worked in graphic design, mostly remote, and said she lived alone with her cat. Nothing weird there. Our first 2 dates were simple. Coffee, then mini golf. She was competitive, but in a fun way. She asked questions about my job, my family, normal stuff. She did not overshare. She did not act obsessed. If anything, she seemed a little guarded. So by the third date, the rooftop one, I felt comfortable. We ordered drinks. Mine was something basic. Hers looked expensive and came in a glass shaped like a light bulb. We talked about random things. Bad coworkers. Childhood pets. She asked if I still went to the gym near my apartment. I said yeah, a few times a week. She nodded like she already knew that. I did not think much of it at the time. About halfway through the night, she pulled out her phone. She said she wanted to show me something funny. I leaned closer, expecting a meme or a video. Instead, she opened her photo app and turned the screen toward me. It was a shared album. The title was my full name, first and last. For a second, my brain did not process it. I actually thought maybe she was joking. Maybe it was some weird coincidence. But then I saw the cover photo. It was me, walking out of my apartment building. Not a selfie. Not something I posted online. A photo taken from across the street. My stomach dropped so fast, it felt like missing a step in the dark. I stared at the screen, waiting for her to laugh and say it was a prank. She did not. She looked proud, almost excited. I scrolled. There were dozens of pictures. Me at the gym, stepping off the treadmill. Me carrying groceries. Me sitting at the coffee shop where we first met, from an angle that made it obvious she had taken it before we ever talked. Some were taken through windows, some from inside cars, some from far enough away that I looked small and unaware. Every single one was dated, organized. I asked when she took these. She said she liked documenting important things. Important things. I felt I was outside my body, watching myself react, trying to stay calm because we were in public, because panicking would draw attention, because I did not want to believe what I was seeing. I kept scrolling. There were screenshots too, my social media posts, my tagged photos, comments I had left on random pages, even a screenshot of my LinkedIn profile. Then I saw something worse. A photo of my bedroom window, from outside, taken at night. The curtains were slightly open and the light was on inside. I could see the edge of my dresser. I had never posted anything that showed which window was mine. I asked how she knew which apartment was mine. She shrugged and said it was not that hard to figure out. She reminded me that I had once mentioned living above a bakery, that my building had a blue awning, that I usually parked on the right side of the lot. Small details I did not even remember sharing. She had. She said she liked being thorough. My hands felt cold even though it was warm on the rooftop. I looked around, half expecting someone else to be watching us, like this was some kind of setup. But everyone else was just drinking and talking, living normal lives. I went back to the album. There was a video. I tapped it before I could stop myself. It was me unlocking my apartment door. The camera angle was from the end of the hallway. Inside the building. That meant she had been inside. I felt sick. She leaned closer to me like she was sharing something intimate. She said she wanted me to see how much effort she put into the people she cared about. Cared about. We had been on 3 dates. I asked if anyone else had access to the album. She said no, just us, that she had been waiting for the right moment to share it. The right moment. I thought about the gym again. The times I felt like someone was looking at me but brushed it off. The car that seemed to park near mine a few times in the evening. The random follow request from an account with no profile picture that I ignored. It all started lining up in my head. I scrolled to the very top of the album. The first photo was dated 3 weeks before our first date. It was me sitting at an outdoor table at the coffee shop, reading a book. She had not noticed my book that day. She had already been watching. I asked why she did not just talk to me sooner. She said she needed to make sure I was consistent. That word again. Consistent. She said she tracked my routine to see if I was stable, if I had patterns, if I was safe to invest in. Invest. Like I was a stock. I felt trapped even though we were in open air. I told her this was not normal. She frowned slightly, like she was disappointed in my reaction. She said everyone watches everyone now, that this was just a more organized version of what people already do online. But this was not online. This was outside my window, inside my building. I noticed a small cloud icon at the top of the album. Shared. That meant she could add to it at any time. She told me she updated it daily. Daily. I closed the app and handed her phone back slowly. I told her I needed some air, even though we were already outside. I stood up and walked toward the stairs without waiting for her. My legs felt weak. I kept expecting her to grab my arm, but she did not. She stayed seated. When I reached the bottom of the parking garage, I checked behind me. She was leaning over the railing above, looking down at me. Not angry. Just watching. I got in my car and locked the doors. My phone buzzed before I even started the engine. A notification. She had added a new photo to the album. I did not want to open it, but I did. It was a picture of me standing beside my car, looking up toward the rooftop, taken seconds earlier. She had zoomed in close enough that I could see the tension in my face. The caption said first reaction. I blocked her number right there. Deleted the app. The next morning, I checked my email. There was a notification saying I had been invited to join a shared album. Same title. My full name. Different account. I moved out of that apartment within a month. Changed gyms. Changed coffee shops. Sometimes I wonder how many albums are out there with names on them.
Hey guys, really sorry to disturb you, but if you're enjoying the stories up until this point, please smash that like button. That's all I'm asking for you guys. Let's break some records this year. Now back to the stories.
I knew I should have stayed inside when I saw his car already parked across the street. He was supposed to text me when he got close. That was the normal thing. But instead, I stepped out of my apartment building after work and he was just there, engine running, had lights off, like he had been waiting a while. I remember thinking it was kind of intense, but also kind of flattering. No one had ever insisted on picking me up before. Most guys just sent an address and expected me to show up. He said he wanted to make sure I got home safe after our date. He said it like it mattered a lot to him. It was only our fourth date. We met at a coffee shop near my office. He had been sitting at the table next to me, working on a laptop that looked too expensive for the place. We started talking because he noticed the book I was reading. He seemed normal. Steady job in logistics, lived about 20 minutes away, like hiking and bad horror movies. Nothing dramatic. But that night, when I opened the passenger door and got into his car, the air inside felt heavy. Not dirty, just thick, like it had not been aired out in a long time. I buckled in and made some comment about traffic. He did not respond right away. He just looked at me, not smiling, not upset, just studying my face. Then he asked why I had changed my work schedule. It hit me weird because I had not told him I changed it. I had switched from the morning shift to a later one 2 days earlier. My manager needed someone to cover evenings and I wanted the extra hours. I had mentioned once that my job sometimes rotated shifts, but I had never said it actually changed. I remember laughing lightly, thinking maybe he was guessing. But he was not guessing. He said I used to get off at 4. Today I got off at 7. The way he said it made my stomach drop. Not accusing, just stating a fact. I asked how he knew that. He shrugged like it was obvious. He said he had stopped by my work on Monday to surprise me with coffee and I was not there. That alone was enough to make my skin crawl. We were not at surprise coffee level. We were at maybe grabbing tacos once a week level. I tried to keep it casual. I told him I had switched shifts recently. He nodded slowly, like he was processing something bigger than what I said. He pulled away from the curb finally. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. City lights passing by, soft music playing low, but I could feel it, this tension sitting between us. Then he started listing things. He mentioned how my office lights usually turned off at 4:15, how the cleaning crew came in around 5, how my car was not in the parking lot on Tuesday morning. My chest felt tight. He had been watching. Not once. Not by accident. Multiple days. I asked him why he had been near my work that often. He said it was on his route home sometimes. It was not. He lived in the opposite direction. I stared out the window and noticed we were not taking the road toward the restaurant we had planned to go to. I told myself maybe he was avoiding traffic. Maybe he had a better shortcut. But the buildings got smaller, the streetlights farther apart. I finally checked the map on my phone. We were heading toward an industrial area near the old rail yard. Warehouses, storage units. Not a single restaurant open past 5. I asked where we were going. He said he wanted to show me something first. My brain started replaying everything from the past few weeks, the way he had casually asked what days I worked, how he always seemed to text me right as I was clocking out, how he once mentioned he liked knowing where the people he cared about were at all times. I thought that was romantic. It was not. We pulled into a nearly empty lot beside a long gray warehouse. Only one other car was parked near the far corner. The windows of the building were dark. He turned off the engine. The silence felt loud. I reached for the door handle casually, just to test it. Child lock. My pulse went crazy. I tried to stay calm. I asked what this place was. He told me he rented a small storage space there, said he kept some of his personal projects inside. That word again. Projects. He got out of the car and walked around to my side, opened the door from the outside before I could pretend to be busy on my phone. I stepped out slowly. The air smelled like oil and dust, distant train tracks clanking somewhere behind the buildings. He led me toward one of the roll-up doors along the side. His footsteps echoed too loudly on the concrete. I told myself to memorize details, the number painted above the unit, the way the security camera was angled toward the main gate and not this side. He unlocked the padlock and lifted the door. Inside, it was cleaner than I expected, not stacked with random junk, just a folding table, 2 metal chairs, and a corkboard mounted on the back wall. And then I saw it. Photos. Dozens of them. Printed, pinned, arranged in rows. They were of me. Walking into work, getting into my car, sitting by the window at the coffee shop, leaving my apartment building. Different days, different outfits. Some were zoomed in so close it made my stomach twist. In the center of the board was a printed copy of my weekly schedule. The old one. The morning shifts. Each day highlighted in yellow. I felt dizzy. He stepped closer to the board, pointing out gaps where he said the pattern broke, where I had not appeared when expected. He had mapped my routine like it was a science project. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. He said he liked consistency, said it made him feel secure. When I changed my shift without telling him, it made him worry. Worry. Like I put in my hours. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to think clearly. Yelling would not help. Running might not work if he caught me. I told him I was sorry for not mentioning it, that things at work had been unpredictable lately, that I understood why he might feel confused. He relaxed a little, actually smiled. He said he could adjust the board, said he just needed the updated schedule so he would not get anxious. That word, anxious. Like this was about his mental comfort, not my safety. I nodded slowly and said I could send it to him later. He turned to grab something from the table behind him. That was my moment. I ran. I did not look back. I sprinted past the open unit, past his car, toward the main gate. My lungs burned, but I did not stop. I heard him shout once, then his footsteps. But he had parked closer to the unit than to the exit, and the gate was not locked from the inside. I pushed it open and ran into the street without checking for traffic. I kept running until I reached a gas station 2 blocks down, lights bright and people inside. I stayed there until my friend came to get me. I blocked his number that night, deleted everything. A week later, I found a small envelope taped to my apartment door. Inside was a printed copy of my new schedule. Correct. With a note at the bottom in his handwriting saying he was glad we were back on track. I moved out 2 days later. Last I heard, he still works in logistics. Sometimes when I get off work, even now, I check the cars parked across the street before stepping outside. I knew something was off before I even knocked, and that is saying a lot because I usually ignore red flags if the girl is pretty enough. But standing on her porch that night, holding a cheap bottle of $18 wine I barely understood, I had this weird pressure in my chest like I had already made a mistake. We had only been talking for 3 weeks. We met through a random comment thread about horror movies, which should have been my first clue. She liked the old slow ones where nothing really happens until the last 10 minutes. She said they felt real. That word stuck with me. Real. Her house was not what I expected. I thought she would live in some apartment downtown, something noisy and normal. Instead, she gave me an address way out near the edge of town where the streetlights get spaced out and the houses sit back from the road like they are hiding. The yard was too neat, like someone had trimmed every blade of grass by hand. The windows were dark except for one soft yellow glow near the back. I remember thinking that the house looked like it was holding its breath. When she opened the door, she looked exactly like her photos, which almost made it worse. Sometimes when people look different in person, at least you can blame your nerves on that. But she looked calm, excited even, like she had been waiting a long time for something specific. Inside, it smelled like rosemary and something metallic under it. Not strong, just faint. The hallway was narrow and lined with framed photos. I did not stop to really study them at first, but I noticed they were all of her. Not family pictures, not friends, just her, standing in different rooms of the same house. She led me into the dining room, and that is when I saw it. 2 plates were set across from each other on the small wooden table. Candles in the center, folded napkins, silverware placed perfectly straight. Everything looked like a Pinterest board. And then there was the third chair. It was pulled back from the table and turned around completely facing the wall, not just slightly angled. Fully rotated so its back faced us, and its seat faced the blank white wall behind it. It was positioned like someone had been sitting there and was told to turn around. I stopped walking without meaning to. I told myself maybe she had been moving furniture around. Maybe she was cleaning earlier, but the rest of the room was so deliberate. Nothing else was out of place. She smiled at me and walked past the table like it was normal, like the chair did not exist. I followed, trying to act casual. I set the wine down near the plates. The food was already served. Pasta with some kind of creamy sauce and chicken on top. It looked good, way better than anything I could make. But I could not stop looking at that third chair. I kept waiting for her to turn it around, to laugh and explain it, but she did not even glance at it. I sat down. She sat across from me. The candles flickered between us. The third chair stayed in my peripheral vision, just there, watching the wall. I tried to focus on normal things. The food tasted fine. The house was quiet, too quiet. No TV in the background, no music, not even the hum of a refrigerator. I realized I could hear my own chewing way too clearly. That metallic smell drifted through again, stronger now that I was seated. I glanced toward the kitchen doorway. The counters looked spotless. My eyes wandered back to the hallway of photos. From where I was sitting, I could see a few of them clearly now. They were all dated in the corner in small handwriting. Different years. But the weird part was that she looked exactly the same in all of them. Same haircut, same clothes, same expression. It felt staged. Halfway through the meal, I noticed something else. There were 3 glasses on the table, 2 filled with water, 1 empty, placed directly in front of the third chair. I do not know why that detail hit harder than the chair itself. Maybe because it meant the chair was not random. It was set for someone. I tried to convince myself she just forgot to remove it. People make mistakes when they are nervous. But then I saw the indentation on the carpet beneath the third chair, darker than the rest of the floor, like it had been in that exact spot for a long time. She kept glancing at the wall behind it. Not at me, not at her food, at the wall. I finally looked at the wall too. At first, it seemed blank, plain white paint, but then my eyes adjusted and I saw faint lines, scratches, vertical marks clustered in the center, a shoulder height if someone were sitting in that chair. My stomach dropped. I do not know how long we sat there like that, me pretending to eat or staring at nothing. Then I heard it. A soft, dull thud. Not from outside. Not from upstairs. From the wall. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. She did not react. Or maybe she did, but not the way I expected. Her lips curved slightly, like she had been waiting. Another thud. Heavier this time. It sounded like something hitting from the other side of the wall. That was when I realized the dining room was at the back of the house. There should not be another room behind that wall. Just the backyard. I tried to piece it together logically. Maybe there was a shed attached. Maybe plumbing. Maybe animals. But the thuds were spaced out, irregular. Almost intentional. My chest felt tight. I stared at the third chair. Imagine someone sitting there, facing the wall, listening to that sound for hours. The metallic smell grew stronger. It was not coming from the kitchen. It was coming from the wall. I stood up slowly. She finally looked at me, her face blank. I walked toward the third chair before I could stop myself. My legs felt disconnected from my brain, like curiosity was dragging me. The wall up close was worse. The scratches were deep, layered over each other, and there were faint brown stains near the baseboard, smeared unevenly. Another thud came, right in front of my face. I jumped back. That was when I noticed something I had missed before, a faint outline in the paint, a rectangle, slightly raised edges, like a door that had been painted over. The realization hit me so hard I almost laughed. It was not a solid wall. It was a sealed doorway. I turned to look at her. She was still sitting at the table, hands folded neatly in her lap now, her plate pushed aside, watching me. No panic, no surprise. Just waiting. The next thud was louder, desperate. I do not know why I reached for the edge of that hidden door. Maybe I thought someone needed help. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that this was all some misunderstanding. My fingers traced the seam. The paint cracked slightly under pressure. And then, clear as anything, I heard a muffled sound from inside. Not a knock this time. A drag. Like something heavy shifting against wood. I stumbled back. My brain finally caught up with my body. Nothing about this was normal. Nothing about this was safe. I looked at the table again, at the 2 plates we had used, at the third glass waiting patiently. This was not dinner. This was a rotation. The scratches on the wall were not random. They were made by someone sitting in that chair, facing the door, hearing whatever was trapped behind it. Maybe waiting for their turn. The metallic smell was not food. It was old blood soaked into the baseboard, sealed in by layers of paint. The thud stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was worse. She stood up slowly. Not rushing. Not angry. Just moving like the night was following a schedule. I backed toward the hallway. My shoulder brushed against one of the framed photos, and it tilted slightly. I caught it before it fell. That was when I saw it clearly. In the reflection of the glass behind her in the picture, there was that same third chair facing the wall. In every photo. Different years. Different outfits. Same setup. I dropped the frame. I did not wait for anything else. I did not look at her again. I ran down the hallway, past her endless self-portraits, out the front door, into the cold air that finally felt breathable. I did not stop until I was in my car with the doors locked. Even then, I sat there shaking, staring at the house. The dining room light was still on. Through the back window, I could just barely see the table. 2 plates had been cleared. The third chair was turned back around now, facing the table. Waiting. I knew it was wrong the second the word left his mouth. Not because I hate labels or anything dramatic like that, but because of the way he said it. Confident. Final. Like it had already been decided somewhere I was not invited to. We were only on our 3rd date. The restaurant was one of those loud downtown spots where the music is too heavy for the size of the room. Exposed brick walls, hanging bulbs, servers rushing around with trays of cocktails that cost $19 each. It was crowded enough that you had to lean in close to hear anything. I remember feeling good when I walked in. He looked sharp. Clean jacket, hair done, smiling like he was proud to be there with me. We had met at a friend's game night a few weeks earlier. He was funny in a dry way, kind of sarcastic but not mean. He texted consistently. asked about my day. Nothing intense. The first 2 dates were casual, coffee, and then a walk by the river. He held my hand once but let go quickly when I shifted. He seemed respectful. That night, we just sat down and ordered drinks when it happened. A guy from across the restaurant came over to our table. Older than us, maybe mid-30s. He looked surprised to see him there. They did that half-hug thing guys do when they run into someone they know. The stranger asked who I was. Without even glancing at me, he said I was his girlfriend. Just like that. My brain stalled for a second. I thought maybe I misheard over the music, but the stranger smiled wide and said something about how that was serious. Serious. I laughed awkwardly and waited for him to correct it, to say something like we are just getting to know each other. He did not. He kept his hand resting lightly on my lower back steady, claiming. The stranger congratulated him, told him he always knew he would settle down before the rest of them. I felt my face get hot, not in a cute, embarrassed way, an entrapped way. When the stranger finally left, I leaned in and quietly said we had not talked about that. He looked confused, like I was the one being strange. He said it was not a big deal. That girlfriend was just a word. But he did not say it lightly. He said it like it was already true. I tried to brush it off at first. Told myself maybe he just wanted to avoid explaining our whole timeline to some random guy. But as the night went on, it got worse. The server came by and asked if we wanted to split the check later or keep it together. Before I could answer, he said together, for us. For us. He said it smoothly, like it had been practiced. I noticed he kept using words like we and ours when talking about future concerts. When mentioning a trip he wanted to take later in the year, he said we could go. We. I barely knew his middle name. At some point, he excused himself to the restroom. While he was gone, the same stranger walked past again and smiled at me. He said I was lucky that my boyfriend was a solid guy. Boyfriend. That word hit differently. I forced a polite smile and nodded, not knowing what else to do. When he came back, I told him his friend had called him my boyfriend. He shrugged and said it was basically the same thing. I told him it was not. That is when the shift happened. His expression tightened slightly. Not angry, more like irritated. He asked what the difference was if we were clearly exclusive. Exclusive. We had never said that either. I felt like I was losing track of a conversation that had happened without me. I reminded him it had only been 3 dates. He leaned closer across the table and said, "Sometimes you just know." That made my stomach twist. Because I did not know. I asked if he had told other people that already. He did not answer directly. He just said he liked being intentional. Intentional. The rest of dinner felt heavy. He kept touching my hand, my shoulder, and my back. Small gestures that now felt less sweet and more territorial. When the check came, he paid without asking me again. He said that is what a boyfriend does. I did not argue. I just wanted to leave. Outside, the air was cooler, but my chest still felt tight. The street was busy, cars honking, people laughing, normal city noise. He wrapped his arm around my waist as we walked toward the parking garage. I gently stepped out from under it. He noticed. He asked if something was wrong. I told him it felt fast. He stopped walking. Right there in the middle of the sidewalk. He said he did not like feeling like I was embarrassed of him. Embarrassed. That was not what this was. I told him I just wanted things to move naturally. He said they were natural, that labels make things clear. Clear to who? When we reached the garage, I told him I would drive myself home. He insisted on walking me to my car anyway. As we stood by my door, he leaned in close again and said he hoped I would not correct him if he introduced me that way again. Again. Like it was already planned. I asked why it mattered so much. He looked at me for a long second. Then he said it helps people understand boundaries. Boundaries. That word felt wrong in his mouth. I got in my car and locked the doors quickly. As I pulled out of the garage, I noticed he was not heading to his car. He was on his phone, watching me leave. When I got home, I had 3 notifications. One from him. One from a girl I did not know. And one from social media. I opened the app first. He had posted a photo. A picture of us from earlier that night, taken when I was not looking. The caption said date night with my girlfriend. My chest felt hollow. I checked the comments. That same stranger from the restaurant had commented with a congratulatory message. So had two other accounts I did not recognize. I texted him immediately and told him to take it down. He replied that he did not see the issue. I told him I never agreed to that label. He said I did not have to agree, that he knew what we were. That is when it clicked. It was not about the word. It was about control. About deciding something publicly so it felt harder for me to walk it back. The girl who had messaged me turned out to be someone he had dated months earlier. She asked if we were official now. When I said no, she said he had introduced her the same way once, on their second date. I blocked him that night. The next morning, the post was still up. Caption unchanged. I should have lied. That is the first thing I think about when I replay it. I should have said something basic like heights or spiders or public speaking. Something boring. Something useless. Instead, I answered honestly, because that is what you do when you were trying to build something real with someone. We were sitting in a quiet corner of a board game cafe that smelled like coffee and old cardboard. It was one of those places with shelves covering every wall, stacked with games nobody actually knows how to play. Dim lighting, low music, people hunched over tables arguing about rules. It was our fourth date. We had matched online and bonded over random trivia and late-night messaging. She was quick with comebacks, kind of blunt, but in a way that felt refreshing. She said she worked freelance, mostly from home. Flexible schedule. Lots of free time. Our first few dates were simple. Tacos. A museum. A long walk through a park where she asked a lot of questions about my childhood. Not surface-level questions either. Detailed ones. What my room looked like growing up. Whether my parents fought loudly or quietly. What kind of dreams I had as a kid. I thought she was just curious. That night at the cafe, we had just finished a game neither of us fully understood. She beat me anyway. She seemed focused the entire time, studying the board like it mattered. After we packed the pieces away, she leaned back in her chair and said she liked asking people one question on the fourth date. I laughed and asked what kind of question. She said she wanted to know my biggest fear. It caught me off guard, but it did not feel threatening. People ask stuff like that all the time. It's one of those fake deep questions that usually leads to something playful. I hesitated for a second, then answered. I told her my biggest fear was being buried alive. I do not know why I said that. Maybe because when I was younger I read about a guy who woke up in a coffin after being declared dead. Maybe because the thought of being trapped underground with no air has always stuck with me. She did not laugh. She did not tease me. She reached into her bag slowly and pulled out a small black notebook. Not a phone. An actual notebook. She flipped it open and wrote something down. I felt a small twist in my stomach. I asked what she was writing. She said she liked to keep notes. Notes. I tried to keep it light. I asked if she was grading me. She finished writing, closed the notebook, and looked up at me. She said, "Good. That narrows it down." It was the way she said it. Not joking. Not smiling. Just factual. My chest felt tight for a second, but I forced a laugh. Told myself she was just being weird in a quirky way. I asked what she meant. She shrugged and said everyone has something that gets under their skin. It is efficient to know. Efficient. That word stuck. We changed the subject after that, or at least I tried to. She kept circling back to fears in general. Asked if I ever had panic attacks. Asked how I handled tight spaces. Asked if I ever went caving or anything like that. I told her no. She nodded thoughtfully. When we left the cafe, it was already dark. The parking lot behind the building was poorly lit, only 2 working lamps at the far end. She offered to walk me to my car. I said sure. As we walked, she asked if I trusted her. That felt random. I said I did not have a reason not to. She smiled at that. I drove home feeling slightly unsettled, but not enough to cut things off. She texted me later saying she had fun. I responded the same. The next few days were normal. Then small things started happening. I would come home from work and find my closet door slightly open, even though I was sure I had closed it. Once, I found a small pile of dirt on the floor near my bedroom window. Not a lot, just a smudge. I told myself it was nothing, maybe from my shoes. One night, I woke up around 3 in the morning feeling like the air in my room was heavy. My chest felt tight. I sat up, trying to breathe slowly. I heard a faint scratching sound. Coming from below. I froze. My apartment was on the ground floor, but the bedroom floor was solid wood. There was no basement beneath me. The scratching stopped after a few seconds. I lay awake for hours. The next day, she texted me asking how I slept. I said fine. She asked if I ever sleepwalk. That made my skin crawl. I asked why she would ask that. She said she read an article about stress causing weird nighttime behavior. I did not mention the scratching. A week later, she invited me to her place for dinner. I hesitated, but part of me wanted to prove to myself that I was overthinking everything. Her house was old or small, with a fenced yard and a detached garage. She said she had been renovating parts of it slowly. Inside, it looked normal enough. Clean. Minimal furniture. But there were plastic sheets taped along one hallway, like she had been doing construction. She apologized for the mess and said she was working on a storage project. Storage. That word hit differently now. During dinner, she asked again about my fear. More details this time. How deep did I imagine it being? Did I picture wood above me or concrete? Did I think I would scream or stay quiet? I felt like my fork weighed 10 pounds. I told her it was just an irrational thing. She smiled faintly and said fears are rarely irrational. After we ate, she said she wanted to show me something in the back room. I should have left. Instead, I followed her down the hallway with the plastic sheets. The air smelled faintly like soil. She opened a door at the end. Inside was a partially dug pit in the floor. Not huge, but deep enough. The dirt was piled neatly to one side. There was a wooden frame leaning against the wall. I could not speak. She stepped inside the room and looked down at the pit like she was proud. She said she liked to confront fears head on. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I asked what this was. She said it was a project, that she wanted to understand panic, to study it up close. Study it. She turned to me and asked if I would ever let someone help you face your worst fear. I backed up slowly. She did not move toward me. She just watched. I noticed then that the door had a lock on the outside, not inside. My chest tightened. I told her I needed air. She did not try to stop me this time. I walked quickly back through the hallway, out the front door into the yard. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys once before unlocking my car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. She was standing in the doorway watching. 2 days later, I had a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of a notebook page. My name written at the top. Under it, a list. Fear of burial. Fear of suffocation. Fear of confinement. And below that, a single line. Exposure pending. I have not heard from her since. But sometimes at night, when I hear pipes knocking in the walls or wind under the floorboards, I think about that pit. And how calm she looked standing next to it. I knew something was wrong about 10 minutes in, but I stayed because I did not want to be dramatic. That is the worst instinct to have on a date. You start noticing little things, little cracks in the vibe, and instead of listening to your gut, you tell yourself you are overreacting. We met at this small late-night ramen place near the university. It was one of those narrow spots with fogged-up windows and steam constantly rising from the kitchen. The door had a bell that rang every time someone walked in. The tables were crammed close together, so you could hear parts of other people's conversations without trying. It was our first date in person. We had been messaging for about 2 weeks. He seemed funny, sarcastic in a dry way. He sent voice notes sometimes, which made him feel more real. He worked nights at a shipping warehouse, so our schedules were weird, but we made it work. He suggested the ramen place because it stayed open past midnight. I thought that was kind of cool, spontaneous. When I got there, he was already seated in a booth near the back, facing the door. I did not think much of that at first. Some people just prefer seeing who comes in. He stood up when he saw me, smiled, gave me a quick side hug. Normal. We ordered. He kept glancing at the entrance every time the bell rang. Quick looks at first, subtle, like he was just people watching. Then I noticed he would whisper something under his breath each time someone walked in. I could not catch it the first few times. Just a soft murmur. I asked if he was okay. He said, yeah, just thinking. The next time the bell rang, I heard it clearly. Not yet. He said it so quietly, I almost doubted myself. I laughed awkwardly and asked what he meant. He brushed it off, said he was just talking to himself. I told myself that was harmless. Some people do that. But he kept doing it. Every single time the door opened. A group of students came in, laughing loudly. He glanced up, eyes tracking them, and whispered, not yet. An older couple walked in. Same thing. A delivery driver, not yet. My stomach started tightening. I tried to pull his focus back to the conversation. Asked about his job. About his family, he answered, but his attention was split. Every ring of that bell snapped his head toward the entrance. At one point, I stopped mid-sentence just to see if he would notice. He did not. The bell rang again, and he leaned slightly forward, staring at whoever was coming in. Not yet. I felt like I was sitting next to someone waiting for a bus that never arrived. I asked if he was expecting someone. He paused for half a second before saying no. The hesitation was small but noticeable. The ramen arrived, steaming hot. He barely touched his. His eyes kept drifting back to the door. I started to feel like I was part of something I did not understand. After about 40 minutes, the restaurant got busier. More people, more noise, the bell ringing constantly. Every time, the same whisper. Not yet. I started counting. 5 times in 10 minutes. I noticed something else too. He would check his phone immediately after each whisper. Just a quick glance at the screen, then back to the door. Like he was waiting for confirmation. My pulse was racing now, but I tried to stay calm. We were in public. Bright lights. Plenty of people around. I leaned forward and asked directly what was going on. He smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. He said he just liked patterns, that he was observing. Observing what? He did not answer. Another group walked in, 3 guys in hoodies. He stiffened slightly, eyes locked on them. Not yet. One of the guys looked around the restaurant, scanning faces, then sat down near the window. My date exhaled slowly, almost disappointed. I felt like I was sitting next to a ticking clock. I started thinking about leaving, making up an excuse, but something in me wanted to understand what he was waiting for. About an hour in, he finally spoke more than 2 words about it. He said sometimes timing is everything, that you have to wait for the right moment. The right moment for what? He did not say. The bell rang again. A woman walked in alone, maybe mid-20s, wearing a red jacket. He watched her carefully as she looked around for a seat. Not yet. He looked almost irritated. I noticed his hand resting near his jacket pocket. Bulky. Like something heavy was inside. My chest felt tight. I asked if he was okay. He nodded but did not look at me. The woman in the red jacket sat at the counter, back facing us. He shifted in his seat. Another bell. A family of 4 walked in. Not yet. His fingers tapped lightly against the table. I realized then that he was not just waiting for someone specific. He was waiting for the right situation. The right combination of people. The restaurant had one main entrance and a back door near the kitchen. If the place got crowded enough, movement would be slower, harder to react. My thoughts started racing in directions I did not want them to go. I glanced at the kitchen staff. They looked busy, unaware. The bell rang again. 2 men in suits walked in. He leaned forward sharply this time. Not yet. One of the men scanned the room briefly before sitting down. My date relaxed slightly. It felt like he was checking boxes in his head. I looked down at his phone when it lit up. A message preview popped up for half a second. Status. My heart dropped. I did not see the rest. I suddenly felt very small in that booth. I stood up abruptly and said I needed the restroom. He looked at me for the first time in a while, really looked. Then he nodded. I walked toward the back of the restaurant, but instead of turning into the restroom, I stopped near the hallway and glanced back. He was still seated, still facing the door. The bell rang again. I watched his lips move. Not yet. I slipped out through the side exit near the kitchen. The staff barely noticed me. Once outside, the cool air hit my face and I realized how tense my body had been. I walked quickly down the block and turned the corner before stopping. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from him, asking where I went. Another buzz, asking if I was coming back. I did not reply. About 5 minutes later, sirens echoed faintly in the distance, more than one. I turned around slowly. 2 police cars sped past the intersection toward the ramen place. My stomach dropped. I did not go back to check. Later that night, I saw a post online about a disturbance at a restaurant near campus. No details, just that someone had been detained after acting suspicious. I blocked his number without reading the rest of his messages. Sometimes I still think about that bell ringing, and his voice under it. Not yet. I did not think a piece of paper could make my stomach drop the way it did that night, but sometimes it is not about what you see. It is about the timing, the casual way someone does something that should not be casual at all. We were sitting in her apartment, second date, take-up containers open on her coffee table. She said she preferred staying in instead of going out somewhere loud. I did not argue. It felt kind of mature, honestly. Low-key. She had ordered Thai food that cost $32 total and insisted on paying because she said she invited me over. Her place was on the 3rd floor of an older building near the edge of downtown. Brick exterior, narrow hallways, stairs that creaked in certain spots. Inside, though, it was neat. Almost too neat. White walls, dark furniture, everything aligned perfectly like it had been measured. We met through a coworker of mine who said she was cool and intense. Intense can mean a lot of things. Passionate, focused, driven. The first date had been drinks at a quiet bar. She asked a lot of questions about my past relationships. Not just why they ended, but specific details. How long they lasted, what went wrong, what I would change if I could. I thought she was just trying to understand patterns. That night in her apartment, the mood felt normal at first, music playing softly, her cat weaving between our legs. She sat cross-legged on the floor across from me, chopsticks in hand, watching me more than she was eating. About halfway through dinner, she said she liked transparency. I nodded, chewing. She stood up without explaining and walked into her bedroom. I remember thinking she was grabbing napkins or something. When she came back, she had a thin black binder in her hand. Not a notebook like a diary, more like a portfolio. She sat down again and placed it on the table between us. She said she believed in tracking personal growth. I laughed lightly, not sure where this was going. She opened the binder. Inside were printed pages. Lists. Names in a column. Dates next to them. Short notes and smaller text underneath each one. My chest tightened slowly as I realized what I was looking at. These were past dates, organized chronologically. Some names had a single line under them. Others had full paragraphs. She flipped through a few pages casually, like she was showing me vacation photos. She said she found it helpful to reflect. Reflect on what? She pointed at one name near the top of the current page. She said this one lasted 3 months, too emotionally distant. Another name. 6 weeks. Inconsistent communication. Another. One date. Lack of ambition. She said it calmly. Clinically. Like she was reviewing job applicants. I felt uncomfortable, but tried to stay relaxed. Everyone has a past. Writing it down is unusual, but not illegal. Then she turned to the last page. My name was there, written neatly, first and last, with the date of our first meeting. My stomach dropped. There were already 2 short lines under it. Good listener. Predictable schedule. Predictable. I asked what that meant. She said she valued consistency. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a pen. She hovered it over the page for a second, glancing at me. And then she crossed off the name above mine. A single line through it. Clean. Decisive. My chest felt tight. I asked why she did that. She said she was narrowing her focus. Narrowing. She said juggling multiple possibilities was inefficient. So she eliminates as she goes. Eliminates. That word hit wrong. I tried to keep my voice steady and asked what happened to the guy she just crossed off. She shrugged and said he did not align. Align how? She did not answer directly. She just closed the binder halfway and rested her hand on top of it. I asked if they were still talking. She shook her head slowly. No. I asked if he knew he had been crossed off. She smiled faintly and said people always know when they are not chosen. Chosen. My skin felt cold, even though the apartment was warm. I tried to tell myself this was just an over-organized person, someone who liked structure. But something about the way she crossed that name off felt final. Not like ending a conversation. More like closing a file. I glanced at the list again. Some names had small symbols next to them, circles, stars. A few had tiny X marks in the corner. I asked what those meant. She said they were reminders. Reminders of what? She did not elaborate. Instead, she leaned forward slightly and asked how serious I was about long-term commitment. It felt like an interview. I told her I was open to it but not rushing. She nodded slowly, pen tapping lightly against the binder. I noticed something then. The names on the earlier pages were all from this year. A lot of them. More than I expected. I asked how many dates she usually went on at once. She said as many as necessary until clarity happens. Clarity. I swallowed hard. I asked what clarity looked like. She tilted her head and said when the list gets shorter. I realized then that this was not about romance. It was about control. About sorting through people like options on a menu. I stood up under the excuse of needing water. In the kitchen, I tried to steady my breathing. I glanced toward the hallway. Her bedroom door was slightly open. Inside, I could see shelves along the wall. More binders, stacked neatly. My pulse raced. How far back did this go? How many names? When I returned to the living room, she had the binder open again. She was adding something under my name. I could see my handwriting reflected faintly on the glossy page. She was writing fast. I asked what she was noting. She said first reactions are important. First reactions to what? She looked up at me. To pressure. Pressure. I realized she had been watching how I responded to the list. Not sharing. Testing. I told her this felt strange. She did not argue. She just closed the binder and said honesty can feel uncomfortable. I grabbed my jacket. She did not try to stop me. She walked me to the door calmly. Before I stepped out, she said she hoped I would not make her use the pen again. I did not know what that meant. I left without responding. The next morning, I got a message from an unknown number. Just a photo. It was the page with my name, now with a small circle drawn next to it. No explanation. I blocked the number. A week later, my coworker mentioned that she had asked about me at the office. Wanted to confirm my work hours. For scheduling purposes. I did not ask what that meant. Sometimes I think about that single line she drew through the other name. How smooth it looked. How easy. I knew it was over the second he said it, but what messed with me was not that he asked. It was how calm he looked when he did. Like we were discussing the weather, not the fact that he somehow knew what I had typed on my phone when he was not even at the table. We were at this new seafood place by the marina. Not fancy, but trying to be. Dim lights, fake candles, loud music that did not match the vibe. He picked it and said he had been wanting to try it. The bill was already climbing past $60 before we even ordered mains. It was our third date. We met at a mutual friend's cookout. He was charming in a quiet way. Not overly flirty, not pushy. He listened when I talked. He remembered small details, like how I hated cilantro and how I always order water with lemon. That kind of attention feels good at first. I remember the night clearly because the air smelled like salt from the water and diesel from boats passing nearby. We got seated near a window overlooking the docks. People walking past outside, laughing, normal. About 20 minutes in, he excused himself to the bathroom. He left his jacket on the back of the chair. I stayed seated, scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly. My friend had texted earlier asking how the date was going. I typed back something simple. Just that it was fine so far. Nothing dramatic. Nothing detailed. I locked my phone and set it down on the table face down. He came back a few minutes later. Sat down. Picked up his fork. And then casually asked why I had texted my friend. My heart dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I stared at him, trying to process what he had just said. I asked what he meant. He tilted his head slightly and repeated it. I asked why I felt the need to text her that it was fine so far. He quoted it exactly. Fine so far. My fingers went cold. There was no way he could have seen my screen for the bathroom. I asked how he knew that. He did not answer right away. He just watched my face like he was studying a reaction. Then he shrugged and said he noticed the reflection in the window behind me. That made no sense. The window was angled toward the docks, not toward the table. And the text message had only been on my screen for maybe 10 seconds. I tried to keep my voice steady and asked if he was serious. He leaned forward slightly and said he does not like being evaluated in real time. Evaluated. I felt like I was in the wrong somehow. Like I had broken some unspoken rule. I told him I always text my friend on the first few dates, just to check in. He smiled thinly and said it feels like a lack of trust. Lack of trust. We barely knew each other. I picked up my phone slowly and checked if it was unlocked. It was locked. I glanced at the settings without making it obvious. Nothing looked different. No new notifications. I tried to replay the last few minutes in my head. When he stood up to go to the bathroom, he had leaned over slightly to grab his napkin. His hand had been near my phone, but I had not thought anything of it. Suddenly, I wondered if he had done something in that moment. Installed something. Paired something. My chest tightened. He kept talking, saying he prefers direct communication instead of third-party commentary. Third party. Like my friend was part of some conspiracy. I told him it was just habit. He asked what else I had told her about him. My stomach twisted. I said nothing. He watched me carefully, like he was measuring whether I was lying. The waiter came by with our food, breaking the tension for a second. Plates clattered down between us. But the mood had shifted completely. He barely touched his food. His eyes stayed on me. I felt exposed in a way I could not explain. Like he had already seen more than he should have. I decided to test something. I picked up my phone again, opened a random app, then locked it. I placed it back down. His gaze flicked to it instantly. Too fast. Almost reflex. I asked casually if he ever worries about privacy. He laughed lightly and said privacy is an illusion. That line hit me hard. Illusion. I suddenly noticed his jacket again. Slightly bulky near the inside pocket. When he shifted in his seat, I heard a faint electronic buzz. Not a phone notification. Something else. Small. I felt sick. I excused myself to the restroom this time. Inside, I locked myself in a stall and turned my phone off completely. Then back on. I checked for unfamiliar apps. Nothing obvious. Then I remembered something. Earlier in the week, he had insisted on helping me with my phone because I mentioned it was acting slow. He had taken it from my hand for maybe a minute. I thought he was just closing background apps. Now I wondered. I downloaded a quick security scan app right there in the stall. It took a minute. The results popped up. Unknown device connected via Bluetooth recently. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I turned off Bluetooth immediately. When I walked back to the table, he was smiling faintly. He asked if everything was okay. I nodded. Sat down. My phone buzzed in my hand, even though Bluetooth was off. A message from an unknown number. It said trust goes both ways. I felt my throat close. I did not show him. I just grabbed my purse and said I was not feeling well. He looked disappointed but not surprised. As I stood up, he reached for my hand briefly. His fingers were steady. He said he hoped I would not overreact. Overreact. I left without finishing my meal. In the parking lot, I checked my phone again. Another message from the unknown number. This one said, "Next time, just tell me directly." I blocked it immediately. That night, I reset my phone completely. Factory reset. New passwords. Everything. 2 days later, my friend told me she got a follow request from someone with a blank profile picture. The bio had one sentence. Fine so far. I did not need more confirmation than that. I have never felt trapped in a crowded place before that night. That is what makes it worse. It was not some empty parking garage or dark alley. It was a busy cafe in the middle of the afternoon, sunlight coming through the windows, people typing on laptops and laughing over coffee. And somehow that made it scarier. We met through a language exchange group online. She said she wanted to practice English more casually. We had been messaging for about a week. She seemed smart, kind of sarcastic, into old movies and random history facts. Nothing intense. Nothing dramatic. She suggested meeting at a cafe near the art district. Bright place. Open seating. Lots of foot traffic. I felt comfortable with that. When I got there, she was already sitting at a small round table near the center of the room. Not against a wall. Not tucked away. Right in the open. She stood up when she saw me and smiled. Normal smile. Warm enough. We ordered drinks that cost $14 each and sat back down. The first 30 minutes were fine. We talked about music, travel, family stuff. She asked a lot of detailed questions, but not in a way that felt invasive at first, just curious. She asked who I live with. I said I had a roommate. She asked how long we had been friends. I told her a couple of years. She nodded slowly, like she was filing it away. I noticed she kept glancing around the room, not nervously, more like she was scanning. I figured she was just people watching. About an hour in, I felt like the conversation had run its course. Not bad, just naturally slowing down. I checked the time on my phone and said I probably had to head out soon because I had plans later. That is when everything changed. She leaned forward across the small table, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Not strong, just there. Her expression shifted slightly. The smile faded, but not into anger. More like something calculating. And then she whispered that if I stand up right now, she will scream. My brain stalled. For a second, I thought she was joking. Some kind of dark humor. But her eyes were steady, focused. I laughed lightly, unsure, and asked what she meant. She did not change her expression. She repeated it, even quieter. If you stand up right now, I will scream. My chest tightened so fast it almost hurt. I glanced around the cafe. People everywhere. A group of college students nearby. A mom with a stroller by the window. 2 guys in suits at the counter. I imagined her suddenly yelling, drawing every eye in the room toward us. I imagined trying to explain. There is no explaining that. I stayed seated. She leaned back slightly, satisfied. I asked why she would say that. She tilted her head and said she wanted to see how I handled pressure. Pressure. My hands felt cold on the table. I told her that was not funny. She shrugged and said she did not say it was funny. I looked toward the door, calculating distance, how fast I could move, how quickly people would react if she screamed. She leaned in again and said she just wanted a little more time. A little more time. I realized she had noticed a shift in my energy before I said anything. She knew I was about to leave. This was not random. This was planned. I tried to keep my voice calm and asked what she wanted to talk about. She smiled faintly and said she had not finished. Not finished what? She started asking more personal questions now. Deeper ones. About past relationships. About mistakes I had made. About secrets. I answered vaguely, trying to buy time. Every time I shifted in my seat even slightly, her eyes sharpened. Like she was waiting. The cafe felt smaller by the minute. I noticed something else then. Her phone was now on the table. It was in her hand, resting on her lap. Angled slightly upward, toward us. My stomach dropped. Was she recording? I asked casually if she was filming. She smiled and said documentation is important. Documentation. My pulse pounded in my ears. I felt trapped in a way I have never felt before. Not physically restrained, but socially cornered. She leaned closer again and whispered that if I make a scene, she will make a bigger one. I could see it in my head. Her yelling, crying, people rushing over, me trying to defend myself. It would not matter what I said. She started talking about trust, about how then leave too quickly when things get serious. Serious. This was our first date. She said she wanted to see how committed I was to staying present. Staying present. My thoughts were racing. I tried to think logically. If she screamed, what would she say? Would she accuse me of something specific? Or just create chaos? I noticed a security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. Small. Pointed generally toward our section. That was something. I slowly leaned back in my chair, making sure not to stand. I told her I was not going anywhere. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She asked if I felt scared. I did not answer. She said fear reveals character. My hands were shaking under the table. I decided to change tactics. Instead of trying to leave suddenly, I started asking her questions. About her job, her family, her hobbies. She seemed pleased at first. She answered in detail. As she talked, her focus shifted slightly inward like she was enjoying hearing herself. I waited for a moment when her attention was not fully locked on my movements. Then I raised my hand casually to get the attention of the barista at the counter. Not standing. Just lifting my arm. She noticed instantly. Her fingers tightened slightly around her phone. I said loudly enough for the barista to hear that I needed help with something. Not shouting. Just firm. A few people nearby looked over. Her eyes widened for the first time. She whispered that I was being dramatic. I kept my hand raised. The barista walked over and asked if everything was okay. I said I was feeling uncomfortable and needed to leave. Simple. Clear. The shift in the room was immediate. The students nearby stopped talking. The mom with the stroller looked concerned. She did not scream. She just stared at me, like she had miscalculated. I stood up slowly this time. Nothing happened. No scream. No scene. Just silence. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the door. I could feel her eyes on my back the entire way. Outside, the air felt unreal. I did not look back. Later that night, I got a message from an unknown number. It said you passed. I did not reply. I knew it was wrong when he said it like he was correcting a child. Not angry, not confused. Just certain, like he had studied something and I was the one messing it up. We met at a bookstore event downtown. It was one of those author talks where half the people are there for the free wine. He was standing next to me in line, made a comment about the book, and we started talking. Easy. Normal. He had this quiet confidence that felt steady. He said he worked in data analysis, which sounded boring but stable. We grabbed coffee the next week. It was fine. Not amazing, not awful. He asked a lot about my job and my neighborhood. I told him I live about 15 minutes from downtown, near a small park and a grocery store that stays open late. He nodded like he was mapping it in his head. Our second date was dinner at a small Italian place that cost around $48 total. He insisted on paying, said he believed in being traditional. After dinner, I told him I would call a ride. He immediately said he would walk me home. I laughed and said it was not necessary, that it was not far. He insisted. Said he would feel better knowing I got back safe. It was not that late, around 9:30. The streets were still busy enough, but he was already standing, grabbing his jacket like it was decided. I did not want to make it weird, so I agreed. We stepped outside into the cool night air, city lights reflecting off the sidewalks, cars passing, normal noise. We started walking in the direction of my apartment. I usually take two possible routes home. One is straight down the main road, well lit but longer. The other cuts through a side street past a row of townhouses and then along the park fence, slightly darker, but faster. I chose the main road that night. Halfway down the block, he slowed slightly. He said, "That is not your way home." My stomach tightened. I asked what he meant. He said, "You usually cut through the side street by the park." Usually. I stared at him. I asked how he knew that. He shrugged and said he noticed last time. Last time. After our first coffee date, I had walked home alone. He had left in the opposite direction. Or at least I thought he had. I told him I switch it up sometimes. He looked at me like that did not make sense. He said the park route is shorter by 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Who times that? I forced a smile and said I felt like taking the main road tonight. He nodded slowly, but there was tension in his jaw. We kept walking. I could feel his attention shift from casual to focused. He started pointing out small landmarks. The convenience store on the corner, the bus stop bench with a cracked seat, the mural on the brick wall. He described them like he had cataloged them before. I told myself maybe he just pays attention. Maybe he had walked around the area before. But then he said something that made my chest feel hollow. He mentioned the flickering streetlight near the entrance to my building. He said it still has not been fixed. I stopped walking. He stopped too. I asked how he knew about that. He looked confused for a second, like he had said something obvious. Then he said he noticed when he was in the area. In the area when? He did not answer directly. He just gestured forward and said we should keep moving. I suddenly felt exposed. Like every time I had walked home alone, someone might have been behind me. I tried to brush it off and keep the conversation normal. Asked about his job. He answered but kept glancing at side streets. Like he was tracking something. About 3 blocks from my apartment, I made a sudden decision. Instead of continuing straight, I turned left into a residential street that leads in a wide loop before reconnecting to my building from the back. It is not my usual path. I just wanted to see what he would do. He stopped immediately. "That is not your building," he said. My pulse spiked. I told him I know. He frowned slightly and said, "Your entrance is on the next block." Your entrance. Like he had stood in front of it. I told him I felt like taking a different way tonight. He looked irritated. Said it is unnecessary to complicate things. Complicate things. I felt a chill run through me. I kept walking down the residential street. It was quieter here, fewer streetlights, parked cars lining both sides. He followed, but his steps were heavier now. He asked if I was testing him. Testing. I said no. He said people who change routines suddenly are usually hiding something. Hiding what? I felt anger mixed with fear. I told him I do not owe anyone a fixed route. He fell silent for a moment. Then he said he just likes predictability. Predictability. That word again. We reached the end of the residential street, which loops back toward the rear of my building. There is a small alley that connects the back entrance. I rarely use it. As we approached, he slowed again. He said that entrance is usually locked. Usually. I felt like my skin was buzzing. I asked how he knew that. He looked at me and finally stopped pretending. He said he has walked by here a few times. A few times. I asked when. He shrugged and said he was curious about where I live. Curious. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely think. I pulled out my phone and pretended to check something. He watched me carefully. I sent a quick text to my roommate, just the word call. As we reached the back entrance, my phone started ringing almost immediately. I answered and said loudly that I was almost home and would meet them downstairs. My roommate played along perfectly, saying they were coming out. He heard that. His expression shifted slightly. Less confident. I told him this is where I go in. He hesitated. Then he said he would wait until I was inside. I said that was not necessary. He did not move. I unlocked the back door and stepped inside the small hallway. Through the glass panel, I could see him still standing there, watching. I walked up one flight of stairs, then quickly down the other side to the front entrance. My roommate was already there. We both looked out through the lobby window. He was no longer at the back door. He was at the front, standing under the flickering streetlight. looking up. I knew something was off when she locked the door and did not apologize for it. That is the moment that replays in my head. Not when she said the line. Not when I realized I was in trouble. It was the click of the lock behind me and the way she did not even glance back at it. We met at a photography workshop downtown. She was one of those people who looks calm in every situation. Steady eye contact. Soft voice. She took photos of strangers on the street like it was normal. Said she liked capturing real reactions. We talked after the workshop ended. She said she was working on a personal project about trust, that she liked observing how people behave when they think they are in control. I laughed at that, thought it was just artsy talk. We went for coffee that day. $11 total. Nothing dramatic. She asked thoughtful questions. What I do for work. Who I live with. What kind of risks I have taken in life. Our second meeting was supposed to be casual. She invited me to her studio space. Said it was part of a shared warehouse where local artists rented rooms. She wanted to show me some prints she was working on. It sounded harmless. The warehouse was on the edge of an industrial district. Not abandoned, but not busy either. Metal doors, faded signs, the kind of place that feels empty after dark. It was early evening when I arrived, still light out, but the sun was dropping. She met me at the entrance and led me down a long hallway with concrete floors and exposed pipes along the ceiling. Her studio door was at the very end. Inside, it was surprisingly clean, white walls, large softbox lights, a couch against one wall, a folding table with camera equipment neatly arranged. She closed the door behind us and locked it. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. I joked about it, said it felt intense. She smiled faintly and said she preferred privacy. I told myself it was fine. We were in a building with other tenants, not isolated in the middle of nowhere. She showed me some of her photos. Portraits of people looking directly at the camera. Close-up shots of faces mid-reaction. Some looked nervous, some confused. I noticed a pattern. Most of the subjects looked slightly uncomfortable. I asked what the theme was. She said anticipation. That word sat weird in my stomach. She offered me water from a small fridge in the corner. I accepted. It tasted normal. We sat on the couch while she scrolled through more images on her tablet. At some point, she asked if I trusted her. I laughed and said we barely know each other. She nodded slowly and said that is what makes it interesting. Interesting how? She stood up and adjusted one of the lights, angling it toward the couch. I did not notice at first, but the room felt warmer. Maybe it was the lights. Maybe something else. My head started to feel slightly heavy. Not dizzy exactly, just slow. I asked if she had turned up the heat. She said no. Then she looked at me carefully and thanked me for being cooperative. Cooperative. My chest tightened. I asked what she meant. She tilted her head and said most men panic by this point. My stomach dropped. By this point in what? She did not answer directly. She just walked toward the door and checked the lock again. The click echoed louder this time. I tried to stand up. My legs felt heavier than they should. Not paralyzed. Just sluggish. My mind started racing. Had she put something in the water? I replayed it in my head. The bottle had been sealed. I opened it myself. So what was happening? She sat down across from me, closer now. Her expression was not angry, not excited, just focused. She said she studies thresholds. How long it takes before someone realizes they are not fully in control. My pulse pounded in my ears. I tried to stay calm. If I panicked, she would probably enjoy that. I asked what she wanted. She said she wanted to observe. Observe what? She gestured around the room. The cameras. I had not noticed before. There were 2 small cameras mounted high in the corners of the walls, pointed toward the couch. My breathing felt shallow. She said some men start shouting. Some try to break the door. Some accuse her of things immediately. She said it was different. Calm. That's when I realized something. She wanted a reaction. Any reaction. This was a performance for her. I forced myself to breathe slowly. I asked how many people had been here before me. She smiled faintly and said enough. Enough. I glanced toward the door again. Solid metal. Probably heavy. I thought about the hallway outside. Other studios. Maybe someone would hear if I made enough noise. But what would I say? That a woman invited me over and now I felt uneasy. It sounded weak even in my head. She leaned forward slightly and said the interesting part is the moment before fear fully sets in. She said there is always a point where the brain flips. I could feel my heart racing. My palms were sweating. But I tried to keep my face neutral. I asked what happens after that point. She looked at the cameras briefly, then back at me. She said that depends on the subject. Subject. Not person. Subject. I felt anger starting to push through the fear. I told her this was not okay. She nodded and said that is usually when they say that. Usually. I realized then that the heaviness in my body was not drugs. It was adrenaline. My muscles were tight. My brain overloaded. She was not physically restraining me. She was relying on psychology. On confusion. On the social discomfort of not wanting to overreact. I stood up slowly. My legs wobbled slightly but held. She watched carefully. I expected her to block the door. She did not. She just said thank you again. For being cooperative. I walked for the door. My hand hovered over the handle. She said most men panic by this point. I turned the handle. It opened. No extra lock. No hidden mechanism. Just a normal door. I stepped into the hallway. My head felt clearer immediately. I did not run. I walked. Steady. Down a long concrete corridor. When I reached the exit, I finally looked back. She was standing in the doorway of her studio. Watching. Not chasing. Not calling out. Just observing. I left the building and got into my car. My phone buzzed before I even started the engine. A message from her. It said you did well. I blocked her number without replying. Later that night, I searched her name online. Found a small photography page. A series titled Thresholds. Every image was a man sitting on that same couch. Faces caught in the exact moment between confusion and fear. I recognized my own expression in one of the newest uploads. I should have walked out the second the drink hit the table, but sometimes the weirdest red flags show up wrapped in confidence. He did not hesitate. He did not even look at me to check. He just told the server what I would have and leaned back like he had done me a favor. We met through a fitness app of all places. He had commented on one of my progress posts, and we started messaging. He seemed disciplined, structured, into routines and optimization and all that self-improvement stuff. I thought maybe that would balance me out. I am more spontaneous, less planned. Our first date was a smoothie place near the gym. Harmless. Protein shakes and small talk. He talked a lot about biohacking and maximizing performance. I half listened. It was not my thing, but it did not feel dangerous. Just intense. The second date was at a lounge downtown that tried to look exclusive, but was basically a dim bar with velvet chairs and overpriced cocktails. $21 each for drinks that barely filled half the glass. I got there first. Texted him that I was inside. When he arrived, he did not ask what I wanted. He signaled the server over and ordered 2 specific cocktails by name. One for him, one for me. I laughed lightly and said I had not even looked at the menu yet. He smiled and said he already knew what I would like. I asked how. He said based on my personality. That should have annoyed me more than it did. The drinks came quickly. Mine was bright red, garnished with something that looked like a dried orange slice. It smelled sweet but strong. I took a small sip. It tasted normal enough, maybe a little bitter under the sweetness. He watched me carefully. I asked what was in it. He listed ingredients casually. Vodka, something herbal, something infused. I nodded. We started talking. The conversation felt slightly one-sided. He kept steering it toward control, discipline, how most people do not know what is good for them. I took another sip. It hit harder than I expected. My head felt warm quickly, like I had skipped a few steps. I told him it was strong. He smiled and said that is the point. I laughed it off. Halfway through the glass, I slowed down. I am not a lightweight, but this felt different. He noticed. He leaned forward slightly and said I should finish it. I told him I was good. He said it works better that way. That line landed wrong. Works better for what? He did not answer directly. Just said, trust me. Trust me. I felt a flicker of irritation. I do not like being told what to do, especially with alcohol. I said I would pace myself. He did not argue loudly. He just kept nudging. Subtle comments about how it was expensive. How it would be a waste. How he picked it specifically for me. Picked it specifically. I took another sip slower. My vision felt slightly unfocused at the edges. The room seemed warmer. He kept watching. Not in a romantic way. In a measuring way. I realized then he had barely touched his own drink. His glass was still almost full. I asked if he did not like it. He said he prefers clarity. Clarity. That word snapped something in me. Why would he want me less clear? I placed the glass down firmly. He looked at it, then at me. His expression shifted slightly. Not angry. Just disappointed. He said it works better that way when you do not fight it. Fight what? My chest tightened. I pushed the glass slightly away from me. He reached out and nudged it back. Small movement. Controlled. I felt a rush of awareness cut through the fog. This was not about taste. This was about effect. I told him I was done. He leaned back and sighed lightly. Said most people resist at first. Resist what? My heart was pounding now. I grabbed my phone under the table and typed a quick message to my friend. Call me in 5. My fingers felt clumsy but steady enough. He noticed my distraction. He asked who I was texting. I said no one important. He did not like that answer. He leaned in again and said finishing it would make things easier. Easier for who? I glanced around the lounge. Dim lighting. Music loud enough to drown normal conversation. A few couples in corners. No one paying attention. I realized how isolated it felt despite being public. My head felt heavy again. Had he done something? Or was it just strong alcohol? I tried to remember if I had watched the bartender make it. I had not. He ordered while I was taking off my jacket. My stomach twisted. I stood up slowly. My legs held. A little unsteady but functional. He reached for my wrist lightly, just enough to stop me, and said I was overreacting. Overreacting. I pulled my hand back. My phone started ringing right on time. My friend. I answered immediately and said loudly that I needed to head home because something came up. He stared at me. Eyes narrow now. Calculating. I grabbed my purse. He did not stand to block me. He just watched. As I walked toward the exit, I could feel his eyes on my back. Outside, the cool air hit my face and cleared my head slightly. I sat on the curb for a minute, breathing slowly. My friend arrived within 10 minutes. I told her everything. The next morning, I checked my messages. He had sent one. It said you almost had it. Almost had what? I blocked him. Later that week, I heard from someone at the gym that he had been asking around about me. Asking if I seemed stressed lately. If I was open to new routines. Routines. I never went back to that lounge. Sometimes I still think about that glass. Bright red. Almost empty. And the way he said it works better that way. I almost lied. That is what gets me. When she asked a question, I almost said no just to keep things smooth, just to avoid making it awkward, If I had said no, I honestly do not know how that night would have ended. We met through a dating app that matches based on shared playlists. It sounded random, but kind of fun. She liked the same obscure indie stuff I do. Our messages were easy at first. She was witty, sharp, a little mysterious, but not in a try-hard way. For our first date, she suggested a small art exhibit on the edge of town, not the main gallery district, more like a pop-up space in a converted warehouse near the river. She said it would be quiet, less crowded, more intimate. I checked the address before leaving. It was real. Had reviews. Seemed normal enough. Before heading out, I texted my sister the location. Just habit. We always share details before meeting someone new. I did not think twice about it. The warehouse was dimly lit inside, string lights across the ceiling, abstract paintings on the walls. Maybe 10 other people there, soft music playing in the background. She was already there when I arrived. Leaning against a pillar, hands in her jacket pockets, she smiled when she saw me. Normal smile. Warm enough. We walked around looking at the art, making casual comments about how none of it made sense. It felt relaxed. Easy. After about 30 minutes, the crowd thinned out. A few people left. The music got quieter. It was almost closing time. She suggested grabbing a drink at a small bar a block away. I agreed. The bar was even quieter. Maybe 3 other tables occupied. Low yellow lights. Exposed brick. The kind of place that feels like it closes whenever it wants. We ordered drinks, $17 each. Sat in a booth near the back. The conversation shifted slightly. Less about music, more about personal stuff. She asked about my family. I told her about my sister, my parents who lived 2 hours away. She nodded thoughtfully. Then she asked, almost casually, if anyone knew exactly where I was right now. The question felt random, but not threatening at first. I said, yeah, my sister has the address. We always share locations on first dates. She frowned. Not dramatically. Just a small crease between her eyebrows. That tiny reaction changed the air completely. I asked what was wrong. She said nothing, just curious. But her tone was flatter now. She asked why I felt the need to tell someone. I said it was just safety. She leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing slightly. She said that implies you think something bad might happen. I told her it was not about her specifically, just a rule I follow. She did not smile. She looked almost disappointed, like I had ruined something. She asked if my sister could track me in real time. I said, yeah, we share live locations. Her jaw tightened slightly. That is when my stomach started to feel heavy. I tried to lighten the mood, joked about overprotective siblings. She did not laugh. She asked if I had told anyone else. I said just her. She stared at the table for a moment, then looked back up at me. I noticed her foot tapping under the table. Small, restless. I asked if everything was okay. She nodded, but her eyes did not match the nod. She said she prefers privacy. Privacy. I said we were in a public bar. She said that is not what she meant. The bartender passed by and asked if we needed anything else. She said no quickly. Almost too quickly. I started replaying the evening in my head. The quiet exhibit. The thinning crowd. The suggestion to move somewhere else. The way she seemed more relaxed as people left. I felt the chill crawl up my spine. She asked what exactly my sister knew. Just the address. The name of the bar. She asked if my sister expected me home at a certain time. I said we usually check in. She leaned forward slightly. Her voice lower now. She said, what if you did not? What if I did not what? She did not finish the sentence. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I realized she was not asking out of curiosity. She was measuring. Calculating risk. I picked up my phone and casually opened the location app. Made sure it was still active. She noticed. Her eyes flicked to the screen. She asked if I trusted her. I said trust builds over time. She looked away briefly. The tension at the table felt thick now. I said maybe we should call it a night. She nodded slowly. Too quickly. Like she had already accepted that outcome. We stood up. Walked toward the exit. Outside, the street was quieter than before. A few cars passing. Not many pedestrians. She walked beside me in silence for a few steps. Then she stopped. She asked again if my sister knew exactly where I was. I said yes. She frowned deeper this time and said that complicates things. Complicates what? She did not answer, just stared at me for a long second. Then she smiled suddenly, the warm version again, said she had an early morning, and turned to walk the opposite direction. I stood there for a moment, heart racing. I checked my phone. My location was still shared. I walked quickly toward the main road, texted my sister that I was heading home. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. A notification that someone had tried to request my location access. Unknown user. I denied it immediately. Later that night, I got a message from her. Just one line. You are very careful. I did not respond. The next day, her profile was gone from the app. Deleted. Sometimes I think about that frown. Small. Subtle. Like a plant adjusting in real time. I did not expect a manila folder to scare me more than anything else that night, but it did. It was not even dramatic looking. Just a plain office folder, slightly bent at the corners like something you would use for tax papers. And that is what makes it worse. It looked normal. We met at a volunteer cleanup event by the lake. He was quiet at first, kept mostly to himself. But when we ended up in the same group picking up trash along the shoreline, we started talking. He was observant. Noticed small details about things, about me. Like how I always double knotted my shoelaces or how I had avoided stepping on cracks in the pavement. I laughed when he pointed that out, said he was very detail-oriented. He said he liked patterns. Our first actual date was coffee. Simple. Nothing weird. He asked about my job, my family, the city I grew up in. I told him I live alone in a small apartment near the university. He nodded thoughtfully, like he was placing that information somewhere specific in his head. The second date was dinner at a casual diner, $36 total. We split. He talked more this time, mostly about psychology, about how people repeat behaviors without realizing it, how choices are rarely random. I did not think much of it. The third date is when everything shifted. He invited me over to his place to cook dinner together. He said he lived in a condo about 10 minutes from downtown. I told my best friend the address before leaving, just in case. His condo building was clean and modern. Glass doors, key fob entry, nothing sketchy. Inside, his apartment was minimal, almost empty. White walls, gray couch, one bookshelf with perfectly aligned books. Everything looked intentional. We cooked pasta, talked about music. It felt normal, comfortable even. After we ate, he said he wanted to show me something interesting. That phrase alone should have made me leave. He walked to a small desk in the corner of the living room and picked up a folder. Plain, manila, no label. He sat down across from me on the couch and opened it. Inside were printed photographs. Women, different women, all sitting up what looked like the same table. Same background, same lighting. My stomach tightened slowly. He handed me the stack, said take a look. I flipped through them carefully. Each photo showed him sitting across from a different woman, all smiling, all mid-conversation. The table looked identical in every picture. Dark wood, small candle in the center. The angle was always the same, like the camera was fixed in one position. I asked what this was. He leaned back and watched my face. Said they were previous dates. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe it was a joke. It was not. He said he documents important interactions. Documents. The room felt colder suddenly. I asked why he had printed them. He said digital files are too easy to lose. I kept flipping through. Some of the women looked relaxed. Some looked slightly tense. One looked like she had just noticed the camera. My heart started racing. I asked where the photos were taken. He gestured vaguely around the apartment. Right here. I looked around more carefully. The table in the photos was not in the living room. It was in a smaller room off the hallway. I had not noticed it before. He stood up and walked toward that hallway. Told me to follow. My legs felt heavy, but I did. The room at the end was set up like a small dining space. Single table, 2 chairs, a candle in the center, and mounted high in the corner, a small camera, pointed directly at the table. My chest tightened. He asked if I noticed the pattern. Pattern. I looked back at the photos in my hands. At first glance, it just looked like normal date pictures. But then I saw it. In every single one, the woman was wearing a similar shade of blue. Not identical, but close. Navy, teal, light blue. My heart skipped. I was wearing blue that night. A dark blue sweater. I asked if that was the pattern. He smiled slightly. Said that was one of them. One of them. I felt dizzy. I looked closer at the photos. The candle in the center of the table was always at the same height, burned down to the exact same level in each image. I realized they were all taken at roughly the same point in the evening, the same stage of the date. I asked what happens after that. He did not answer directly, just said that is when things become clear. Clear how? He stepped closer to me. Too close. My pulse pounded in my ears. He said he likes to observe when people start to feel uncomfortable, when they realize something is off. He said most of them laugh it off at first. Then they ask questions. Then they either stay or leave. I asked what happens if they leave. He shrugged. Said that tells him what he needs to know. I glanced at the door behind him. He noticed. His smile faded slightly. He said, "Do not panic." That word made everything worse. I told him this was weird. He nodded calmly. Said that is part of it. Part of what? He did not answer. Instead, he pointed at one of the photos. The woman in it looked tense. Hands clenched slightly. He said she noticed the pattern too late. Too late for what? My breathing felt shallow. I realized then that the camera in the corner was on. Small red light blinking. I was being recorded. I set the stack of photos down on the table. Told him I was not comfortable. He tilted his head and said that is predictable. Predictable? Like it was just data. I moved toward the hallway slowly. He did not block me. He just watched. Observing. Analyzing. I reached the front door and unlocked it. My hands shaking slightly but steady enough. Before stepping out, I looked back once. He was standing in the doorway of the dining room, holding the folder. Expression unreadable. My phone buzzed as soon as I got into my car. A message from him. It said, "You notice faster than most." I blocked his number immediately. A week later, I saw a new photo posted on a local forum. It was me. Sitting at that table. Candle halfway burned down. Blue sweater. I have had awkward dates. Warning ones. Ones where you both silently agree it is not going anywhere. But I have never had someone explain consequences to me like we were negotiating a contract instead of eating pizza. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. She was funny, confident, the kind of person who talks with her hands and holds eye contact just a little longer than normal. She made a joke about the music playlist, and we ended up talking for most of the night. She was easy to be around. Sarcastic but not mean, she asked what I did for work. I told her I worked remote and live alone in a small apartment near the train station. She nodded thoughtfully, like she was organizing that detail somewhere. We exchanged numbers, texted for a few days. It felt normal. For our first official date, she suggested a small pizza place that cost around $28 total for a large and drinks. Casual, nothing fancy. We sat in a booth near the back. Red vinyl seats, checkered floor, old arcade machine humming in the corner. The conversation flowed at first. Childhood stories, dumb mistakes, Random stuff. Then the topic shifted to dating. She said she hated ghosting. I laughed lightly and said, yeah, it sucks. She did not laugh. She leaned forward slightly and said she really hated it. The way she said it made the air feel heavier. I told her I'd try to be honest if I am not feeling something. She nodded slowly. Then she said the last guy who tried to ghost her learned that lesson the hard way. I smiled awkwardly, assuming it was exaggeration. She did not smile back. She started describing it, calmly, like she was telling a story about a coworker. She said they went on 3 dates. He seemed interested. Then one day he stopped replying. No explanation. No closure. Just silence. She said she waited 2 days before reaching out again. Nothing. So she did what anyone would do. That is what she said. Anyone would do. She looked up his social media. Figured out where he worked. Found his schedule. She said it casually, like that was normal. My stomach tightened slightly. She said she showed up at his office building one afternoon. Waited in the lobby. When he came down for lunch, she approached him. Not aggressively. Just calmly. She told him she does not appreciate being dismissed. He apparently tried to brush it off. Said he had been busy. She said she does not tolerate lies. Then she described how she followed him to his car later that week. Parked across the street from his apartment building for a few nights. Just to make sure he understood that disappearing has consequences. My pulse started picking up. She said he eventually apologized. Sincerely. And they parted on clear terms. She leaned back in the booth and took a sip of her drink. Like she had just told a funny story. I felt like I was missing something. I asked if he had been scared. She tilted her head and said he should have been. Should have been. My chest felt tight. I tried to keep the tone light and said that sounds intense. She shrugged and said men think they can just vanish. Like women are disposable. I told her that is not fair, but showing up at someone's workplace crosses the line. She stared at me for a long second, then asked if I have ever ghosted someone. I hesitated. I have. Not proudly. Just sometimes conversations fade. She noticed my hesitation. Her eyes sharpened slightly. She said honesty is important. I told her yes, once or twice in the past. She nodded slowly, then asked why. I said sometimes it is easier than confrontation. She leaned in closer and said, easier for who? I felt like I was being evaluated, judged. She said she believes in balance. If someone withdraws communication, she balances it. Balances it how? She did not answer directly. Instead, she described more details about the last guy. How she learned his jogging route. How she stood on a sidewalk one morning just watching him run past. How she texted him a photo of himself from across the street. My stomach dropped. She said he responded quickly after that. I stared at her, trying to gauge if she was joking. She was not. Her expression was steady, almost proud. She said she does not like being ignored, that it feels disrespectful. I told her most people just move on. She said she is not most people. The restaurant noise faded into the background for me. I could hear my own heartbeat. I asked if she ever thought about how that might make someone feel unsafe. She looked confused for a second, then said unsafe is subjective. Subjective. I glanced at the door. Calculated how long it would take to stand up and leave without escalating. She noticed. Her eyes flicked toward the exit too. She smiled faintly and said, you are not planning to disappear, are you? My throat felt dry. I said, no, of course not. She nodded. Said good. Because she does not like repeating herself. Repeating what? She did not clarify. The rest of the date felt tense. She went back to normal topics like nothing had happened. But every time I mentioned work or my apartment or my routines, she asked follow-up questions. Small details. What time I usually leave for the gym. Which grocery store I prefer. How often I visit my parents. I answered vaguely. When the bill came, I paid quickly and stood up before she could. She stayed seated for a second longer than normal, just watching me. Then she stood too. Outside, the street was busy. I felt safer immediately. She hugged me lightly and said she had a great time. Her voice was warm again, like the earlier conversation had not happened. That night, she texted me saying she appreciated my honesty. I did not reply right away. I waited an hour. Then two. My phone buzzed again. She said she hopes I am not about to prove her point. My chest tightened. I replied briefly, saying I was just busy. She responded immediately. Said she understands busy. She does not understand silence. I blocked her number the next day. Changed my social media privacy settings. For a week, nothing happened. Then one morning, I found a small printed photo taped to my apartment door. It was me, walking into my building, taken from across the street. On the back, one sentence. Communication matters. I knew I had stayed too long when I started planning my exit in my head instead of listening to what he was saying. That is always a sign. We were smiling on the outside, but inside you were calculating doors, distance, who was around you, what you could say if you needed help. We met through a coworker of mine who swore he was solid, stable job, owns his own place, calm personality. That word again. Calm. It sounds safe until it does not. Our first date was lunch at a sandwich shop. $22 total. Nothing dramatic. He asked thoughtful questions, did not interrupt, held eye contact without being weird. He talked about investing, about planning for the future, about liking control over his environment. I did not think much of that last part. The second date was at his house. He said he preferred cooking instead of going out somewhere loud. I hesitated but agreed. I told my roommate the address before leaving. His house was in a quiet neighborhood, one of those streets where all the lawns look the same and the porch lights are evenly spaced. It was clean inside, almost staged, nothing out of place. Couch perfectly centered. Books arranged by height. No clutter anywhere. He cooked pasta and poured wine. I watched him open the bottle. Nothing suspicious. Just normal. We sat at the dining table, talking about work, about random childhood stories. It felt fine at first. A little stiff, but fine. After dinner, he suggested moving to the living room. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. He started asking more pointed questions. What kind of relationships I have had. Why they ended. Whether I tend to leave first or wait for someone else to. That question stuck. I told him it depends. He nodded slowly like he was analyzing the answer. About an hour in, I felt that shift. That internal nudge that says it is time to go. Not because anything specific happened yet, just because the vibe changed. He moved closer on the couch. Not aggressively, just slowly. I said I should probably head out soon because I had work early. That is when he leaned in slightly, close enough that I could feel his breath, and calmly said that if I leave before he is ready, this gets messy. My brain froze. I laughed nervously at first, thinking maybe it was a joke. He did not smile. His expression stayed neutral. Steady. I asked what he meant. He leaned back slightly, hands resting on his knees. Said he does not like abrupt endings. Abrupt endings. I told him it was not abrupt. I just had an early morning. He said he planned the evening carefully. Planned. My chest tightened. He said leaving before he signals it disrupts things. Disrupts what? He did not answer directly. Instead, he asked if I respect other people's time. I said, of course. He nodded and said then stay a little longer. His tone was calm, not raised. That almost made it worse. I glanced toward the front door. It was visible from the couch. Closed. No extra locks that I could see. I tried to keep my voice steady and said I was getting tired. He tilted his head slightly and said, "You're not tired. You are uncomfortable." My stomach dropped. I said, "Maybe I am." He smiled faintly and said, "Discomfort is part of growth." Growth. I felt like I was being coached instead of dated. I stood up slowly. He stood too, not blocking me yet, just mirroring. I walked toward the kitchen under the excuse of grabbing my purse. He followed a few steps behind. I could feel his presence like a weight. When I reached the counter, I picked up my bag. He stepped closer. Not touching. Just close enough that I could not ignore him. He repeated that if I leave before he is ready, this gets messy. Messy how? He looked at me carefully. Said misunderstandings happen. Misunderstandings. Like he was hinting at something without saying it outright. I felt anger mixed with fear. I told him I was leaving. He sighed softly, like I was being unreasonable. He walked toward the front door ahead of me. For a second, my heart jumped, thinking he would lock it. Instead, he leaned against it casually, arms crossed. Not blocking completely, but making it clear. I told him this was not okay. He said everything is okay. He just wants closure. Closure. I realized then that this was about control. He did not want the evening to end on my terms. He wanted to decide when it was finished. I pulled out my phone, texted my roommate. Call me now. He watched me type. Did not try to stop me. Just observed. My phone started ringing within seconds. I answered loudly. Said I needed to leave immediately because of an emergency. He did not move at first. Just looked at me. Then slowly stepped away from the door. Said if you walk out now, do not expect things to stay clean. Clean. What does that even mean? I did not wait to ask. I'd opened the door and stepped outside. The cool night air hit me like a shock. I walked quickly down the driveway. I could feel his eyes on my back. I did not look. When I reached my car, I locked the doors immediately. He was still standing in the doorway, watching. Not chasing. Not yelling. Just watching. My phone buzzed before I even started the engine. A message from him. It said, "You forced my hand." My hands were shaking as I drove away. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I woke up to a message from my boss asking why someone had emailed claiming I behaved inappropriately on a personal visit. My stomach dropped. I knew immediately. He had my full name. Knew where I worked. The email was vague but concerning enough that my boss wanted clarification. I spent an hour explaining that it was false. That it was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. His word. I blocked him everywhere. Changed my privacy settings. Warned my friends. Nothing escalated beyond that. But sometimes I think about how calm he was. How steady his voice sounded when he said it would get messy. And how easily it almost did. I should have left when she said the word inevitable. Not cute, not romantic, just inevitable. Like we were not two random people who matched online, but pieces being pushed together by something neither of us could stop. We met through a dating app that matches based on random daily prompts. The one that matched us was about superstition. I answered that I did not believe in fate, just coincidence. She answered that coincidence is just fate pretending to be subtle. I thought that was clever. We talked for about a week before meeting. She sent long messages, paragraphs about patterns in life, about how certain people are meant to intersect at specific times. She mentioned astrology once, then numerology, and something about repeating numbers on clocks. I did not think much of it. People believe different things. For our first date, she suggested a small botanical garden cafe on the edge of the city. It was built inside a greenhouse, glass ceiling, plants everywhere. Quiet. Kind of romantic in a low-key way. Drinks were around $15 each. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a table near the back under a hanging fern. She smiled like she'd been expecting me longer than just 5 minutes. The date started normal. Small talk about work. She freelanced as a graphic designer. I told her about my job in marketing. She asked where I grew up, what month I was born in, what time if I knew it. I told her mid-June, around 3 a.m., according to my mom. She lit up at that. Said that made sense. I asked what made sense. She said we were aligned. Aligned how? She did not answer directly. Instead, she pulled out her phone and showed me something. A screenshot or a match notification. Dated exactly 3 months to the day after her previous relationship ended. She said that was significant. I laughed and said it was just how the app works. She shook her head slightly, said it is more than that. She asked what street I live on. I told her the general area, but not the exact address. She nodded thoughtfully. Then she started explaining why this date could not fail. Not might not. Not probably would not. Could not. She said the numbers lined up. Our birthdays were 6 days apart. We both had one older sibling. We both moved cities at age 22. She said the odds of that were low. I told her plenty of people share those traits. She leaned in slightly. Said, but not with these exact details. She said she had done the math. My stomach tightened. Done what math? She said she had looked at the timeline of my public posts. When I started my current job. When I moved apartments. When I posted certain photos. She said her own timeline mirrored mine in strange ways. Mirrored. I felt exposed. She had clearly spent time going through my accounts. She said the date we first exchanged messages was the same day she had dreamed about meeting someone new. I tried to keep my voice steady and said that sounds like confirmation bias. She smiled calmly. Said that is what people say when they are resisting. Resisting what? She said fate does not like resistance. That sentence sat heavy in my chest. I looked around the cafe. Other couples talking quietly. Plants casting soft shadows under the lights. Normal. She asked if I believed in second chances. I said for what? She said for patterns that almost aligned before. I asked what she meant. She hesitated and said she had noticed me months before we matched. Noticed how? She said she saw me in a grocery store near her old apartment. Once in the cereal aisle. Once near the self-checkout. I did not remember her. She said she took it as a sign. My heart skipped. I asked why she did not say something then. She said it was not time yet. Not time yet. She said things have to unfold properly. I felt a slow dread building. She started listing more coincidences. The fact that we both liked the same obscure author. That we both had traveled to the same small town in another state. That we both had broken up with someone in the same month 2 years ago. She framed each detail like evidence in a case. She said when you look at it all together, it is undeniable. Undeniable. I told her coincidences happen when you look hard enough. She frowned slightly. Said that is fear talking. Fear of what? She said fear of inevitability. My hands felt cold around my glass. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was printed screenshots of my posts, dated and circled. She had drawn lines connecting them to her own posts. Like a conspiracy board. My stomach dropped. She said she had been mapping it for weeks. Mapping what? Our convergence. Convergence. I asked what happens if we decide this is not a match. She looked genuinely confused. Said that is not an option. Not an option. I felt like the air had thickened around me. I told her dating always has the possibility of not working out. She shook her head slowly. Said this one cannot fail because it is already written. Written where? She tapped her temple lightly. In the pattern. The way she said it was calm. Not emotional. That made it worse. She asked if I had told anyone I was here tonight. I said yes, my friend knows. She frowned slightly. Said that complicates the energy. Complicates how? She said outside influence can distort outcomes. My pulse started racing. I stood up slightly under the excuse of stretching. She watched carefully. Asked if I was uncomfortable. I said I just needed air. She nodded slowly. Said air is temporary. Temporary. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I told her I think we see things differently. She said that is because you are not ready to accept it yet. Accept what? She leaned closer. Lowered her voice. Said this date cannot fail because it already happened. I felt my chest tighten. She said she had imagined this exact scene weeks ago. Same table. Same plant overhead. Same blue shirt on me. I was wearing blue. I did not remember telling her what I would wear. She said it unfolded exactly as she saw it. My thoughts were racing. Was she guessing? Or had she been watching? I stepped back. Told her I needed to go. She did not try to stop me physically. She just looked disappointed. Said you can leave, but it will not change the outcome. Outcome. I walked out of the greenhouse cafe into the evening air, my heart pounding. I did not look back. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. A message from her. It said you're just on the part where you run. The next message came seconds later. You always run first. I blocked her number immediately. Later that night, I checked my social media. A new account had viewed my stories. Username was Convergence. Profile picture was a photo of that greenhouse. I should have trusted the silence. Not the loud, obvious red flags, not some dramatic moment in the middle of the date. Just the quiet. The way he would go completely still sometimes, like he was waiting for something only he could see. We met at a trivia night at a brewery. He joined my team because they needed one more person. He was smart in a subtle way. Did not brag, did not try to dominate. He just knew random answers about geography and old movies. When we won a $50 gift card for the bar, he joked that it must be fate. I laughed at that. After trivia, we talked outside near the parking lot. It felt easy. He asked for my number, and I gave it without overthinking. Our first actual date was coffee. Basic. Safe. He asked about my job, my apartment, my friends. Nothing unusual. He did this thing where he would nod slowly while I talked, like he was filing things away. The second date was dinner at a small tapas place downtown. $44 total. He paid and brushed it off like it was nothing. Said he appreciated effort. Effort in what? He said in showing up. That line stuck with me later. The third date is the one I keep replaying. We went to a late-night art festival in my neighborhood. Outdoor booths, string lights across the street, live music in the distance. Crowded enough that I felt safe. Public. He seemed relaxed. More talkative than before. He made comments about how nice my area was. How he could see himself spending more time here. I smiled politely. Around 10:30, I said I should head home because I had an early shift. He offered to walk me. I hesitated but agreed. It was only a few blocks and still lively. As we walked, he asked more detailed questions about my building. How many units? If there was security. If the doors locked automatically. I told him vaguely that it was secure. He nodded thoughtfully. We reached my street. Quieter now, fewer people around. My building was at the end of the block, a small brick complex with a keypad entry. As we approached, I felt that small shift again, like something had changed. Not in his tone. In the air. I slowed slightly. He noticed. Asked if I was nervous. I said no. He smiled faintly. We stopped in front of the entrance. I reached into my bag for my keys. My fingers brushed against my phone. I considered texting my roommate, but she was out of town that week. I told him thanks for walking me. He stepped closer. Not aggressively. Just inside my personal space. I typed in the code for the main door. It beeped. Unlocked. I pushed it open halfway. That's when he leaned in slightly, smiling softly, and said, "Relax." This is usually when they realize it is too late. My heart dropped so fast, it felt like I missed a step on stairs. I froze. I asked what he meant. He did not laugh. Did not clarify. Just watched my face carefully. Like he was waiting for the reaction. Usually when who realize. He tilted his head slightly. Said most people think the danger is earlier. In the car. In a dark alley. He said it is never there. It is when they feel safe. My chest tightened. I stepped back slightly into the doorway. The hall light flickered on automatically behind me. He did not follow yet. Just stood on the sidewalk. Calm. Steady. I told him that was not funny. He nodded. Said he was not joking. My pulse pounded in my ears. I asked if he was threatening me. He smiled again. so softly it almost looked kind. Said he does not threaten. He prepares. Prepares for what? He glanced past me into the lobby, then back at me. Said once you open the door, you have already invited me in. My stomach twisted. I told him I did not invite him. He said you gave me the code. My brain scrambled. Had I? I replayed the moment. I typed it in. He was standing close. Close enough to see over my shoulder. I felt sick. He stepped forward slightly. Not touching, but closer. Said relax. This is usually when they realize it is too late. I realized he was not talking about forcing his way in. He was talking about information. Access. Knowledge. He had seen the code. He knew my building. My unit was on the second floor. Easy to find. I stepped fully inside and pulled the door toward me. He placed his hand lightly against it, not pushing hard, just enough to stop it from closing completely. My heart was racing so hard I could barely breathe. I told him to move his hand. He looked at me calmly. Said if you shut the door now, I still know how to get in. That line hit deeper than anything else. He was right. I had no way to change the keypad code myself. It was managed by the landlord. My thoughts were racing. Neighbors. There were neighbors. I raised my voice slightly and said good night. Loud enough to echo down the hallway. A door upstairs opened faintly. Footsteps. He noticed. His expression shifted just slightly. Less confident. He removed his hand from the door. Said we will talk soon. We. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Ran up the stairs 2 at a time. My hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. Inside my apartment, I locked the deadbolt and leaned against the door. My phone buzzed immediately. A message from him. It said you handled that better than most. I blocked him. Then called my landlord the next morning to change the entry code. I told him someone might have seen it. He changed it that afternoon. For 3 nights after, I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made my heart jump. No one tried the door. No one knocked. But sometimes when I walk home at night now, I think about how close he stood behind me. How easily he watched my fingers type. And how calmly he said it was too late.